Alright, so you should have out your Do Not Notepad. Mr. Lieutenant, you should have out your Do Not Notepad. Again, I've said that multiple times. Have out your Do Not Notepad. You should have out a pen and a pen only. Give it today's date of October 18th. Again, happy Friday. Give it today's date of October 18th.
I just got here. I want to go back home.
And as we get ready to get started, let's make sure that all cell phones are turned off and put away. And not just turned off, but turned off and put away. And not just put away, but make sure you actually turn them off before you put them away. Make sure they're not on silent or mute, because that's not what I asked for. I asked for them to be powered all the way off. Do not turn them back on for the entire duration of the class. Do not turn them back on to check the time. Do not turn them back on to check a text. Do not turn them back on to check anything until we dismiss. Make sure they're not on your lap, not on your desk, definitely not in your hand. If you have a hood on, please take your hood off. If you have any AirPods or earbuds or headphones or any multiple of any of those items, please take off all or both of those. And there should have been a time where I see people taking out their cell phones and doing that swipe across the top, or however you turn off the phone. And then give your Do Not Notepad the following title, The Middle Ages. And don't forget to put the date on there because the dates are very significant. Okay, 1066 through 1485. 1066 through 1485. So the last time that we had our PowerPoint notes, we were talking about the Anglo-Saxons. And remember, we are following all of the different inhabitants of the Great Britain territory because all of the different civilizations that inhabited that land have some type of effect on our culture as Americans, but also our language as English speakers. So good morning to you all, and welcome back to the lecture hall, also known as Kelly's class. And so the second movement in the Great Britain territory is called the Middle Ages, also known as the medieval period. And so we'll be on these notes until next week. And next Friday, just as the syllabus says, next Friday we will have a quiz on these notes, which is October, it's Friday, so you said anyway. Which is October 25th. So next Friday, October 25th, will be PowerPoint quiz number 2 in Schoology. So even if you can't make it into class, log into Schoology next Friday the 25th and take your second PowerPoint quiz. And again, it will just be 10 questions, multiple choice, true or false, 2 attempts, open for a week. Have a pen that you can have. So, pardon. It's not the easiest for me to read when you submit it through email. I would prefer that you use, is that your favorite color?
No, that's just
Yeah, I would prefer to use that. Anyone else, pen? Pen going once, pen going twice. So this right here, while you're putting down your title, when I deliver all of these notes to you, of course it is, your priority whether you keep up with this stuff or you toss it directly in the trash can as soon as we finish the quiz. That's up to you. But keep in mind, those of us who have places to go in life, namely college, in English classes, it just really goes through the same exact things over and over and over. There's only so many things that you can do in English. And so topics and books and themes keep reappearing, but then even the skills and the concepts just keep reappearing. So one thing that I've always done is I've always kept my notebooks from college. So I haven't been in college. I mean, I'm in college working on my master's degree, but I'm talking about undergrad college where you get your bachelor's degree. I haven't been in undergrad college in years. I started college in 2001 after I graduated from Mumford High School. And looking at this notebook, this dates all the way back. The first half of it is from 2004. This is 20 years ago. This was well before any of you were even born. And this was my African American literature class, the first half. The second half of it dates back to January 7th of 2005. And I used the notebook for my medieval class, also known as the Middle Ages. So digging through here, I have all of my notes from my college classroom in 2005 on this class period. So this is just an example. Look at all these notes that I took. Okay, just from the professor lecturing and putting a few things up on the board. But this is just an example of how keeping your stuff can actually serve you in the future. If you know that you have these goals and endeavors in life, then try to hold on to this stuff and try now to start organizing your life into the type of life structure that you're going to want for your adulthood. Otherwise, you're probably always going to be behind the 8 ball, as we tend to say. All right, so just this last time, let's look at a timeline of different things that happened during this period. So again, these are the Middle Ages, known as the medieval period from 1066 to 1485. And I'm going to hit the light so that we can try to recognize some of the major things that came about during this era. So let me know if you recognize anything on here. These are the literary events that took place during that time period. In Spain, there was the first mass production of paper. We know all about that because that's what you all are writing on right now. I think that's all that I'm noticing. Lancelot is familiar to me. Somebody was an astronomer, so they studied the sky. Okay. Okay. That's all that looks familiar. Pardon?
The beginning of German epic poem.
Okay. The beginnings of German epic poetry. Okay. And the year 1200. Okay. Let's go down. Those were the literary events. Marie de France, I'm not sure if that rings a bell, but she was first European woman to write narrative poetry. She died in 1216, so all of my young ladies who might become poets, and that might be an inspiration. All right, so here are some historical events in this era. King Edward the Confessor dies, Duke of Normandy invades England. Definitely this is what we're going to talk about in our notes. Doomsday Book records all of the land ownership in English, the Crusades to conquer Christines. Okay. Construction begins on the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. This right here, the only reason I know about this Genghis Khan is because this is a song that plays at LA Fitness. And I always recognize it, but when I actually started to like the song and I started to listen to it, but then when I saw it on here, I was like, oh, that's that song. And this is the song right here. I pulled it up, but this song always plays in LA Fitness. Has anyone heard that song before? No?
I've heard the beat, not the song.
Okay. So that's just an instance of how, pop culture nowadays borrows things from history. English barons forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. Definitely, we're going to discuss that in these notes. Okay. Now let's go over to this last little side. Let's see if we recognize anything here.
The Bible translated.
Where are you at?
13.
Okay. Entire. That was quick. You found that fast. The entire Bible translated into English for the first time by John Wycliffe. I'm not sure if he's related to Wycliffe John. Does anyone know Wycliffe John from the Fugees? Okay. So good. That was good. Here's one that I know you'll recognize. Oldest written reference to legendary hero Robin Hood appears. So I know people know exactly who Robin Hood is. Okay.
First book,
Where you at? Which row? First, second, third, or fourth? Fourth. Okay. First book printed with movable type. Okay. By Gutenberg. Okay. Good. Okay. Chaucer dies. Okay. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Okay. Oh, Dante's Allegory. I'm definitely familiar with that. Let's see, is anything over here? Okay. Oh, we're going to definitely get to the Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales were created. Okay, good. So let's go down to the last actual historical events.
Zimbabwe emerges as major trading.
You found something already? Wow. Okay. Y'all got to tell me which column, John. First, second, or third?
Second.
Second. Oh, the Aztecs began to establish empire. Okay, yeah. And those would be who we would consider the original indigenous people of America, because we know Mexico is considered Central America.
Black Death strikes.
Yeah.
Oh, you've all heard of the Black Death before? Oh, we definitely gonna talk about the Black Death. Maybe you've heard of the 100 Years' War in some movies or not.
English language used to open Parliament.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're gonna talk about that English language.
War between the houses of York. I heard about that, but that was
What column you in?
That's the last one.
Fourth column. Okay.
Yeah.
Inca Empire established in Peru. Leonardo da Vinci was born. He's you probably had heard of him before. And let's just scroll down. And that's it. This is it right here. Okay.
King Richard. Who got King Richard?
Martin Luther King.
Right, yeah, so Martin Luther, he's actually very prolific in the religious sector. So anyone who's probably heard of like a Lutheran church, and that's where you get the name Lutheran from Martin Luther. He was a prolific person in the Christian faith many years ago, and that's what the Christian church follows, is his beliefs on Christianity. And Nicholas Copernicus. And, all right, so good. So these are the things of Great Britain that happened during the medieval period that we are still familiar with very much, because again they have an effect on our culture. So great. Let's go ahead and go to our notes. That's a weird face to get paused on. Okay, so here we go. There's 2 slides today, and I'm just like last time, I'm going to read through the literature of it while you all are copying. So pens up, and don't forget to get the title. And yeah, if you need to see, you can go ahead and just move up. Yes, yep. This whole entire series is going to be for the Middle Ages, and this is just today's slide. The Norman Conquest. This is where we left off at with the Anglo-Saxons. So we learned a decent amount of things from the Anglo-Saxons. We learned that, first of all, before the Anglo-Saxons got to Great Britain, it was the Celts, and it was the Britons who were there, and that's where the land of Great Britain got its name from the Britons who lived there prior. But we then learned that England got its name from the Anglo-Saxons who defeated the Celts and the Britons. We also learned that some of the days of the week came from the Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons were influenced by Christianity, and that's how it was passed down to us. And then also the Anglo-Saxons, they just brought different things to the culture as far as like the English language and just their communal, close-knit community as far as their living quarters and just being around each other so closely. But even the bards, we tend to see them in our pop stars nowadays. These people who were poets, who were known and became legendary for, reciting poetry in a musical fashion. We see that in our pop stars today, gaining legendary status for that artistic form. So definitely the Anglo-Saxons had a great influence on it. On the culture, and we'll be reading Beowulf, and so Beowulf is associated with the Anglo-Saxon times and not with the Middle Ages. So let's talk about the Middle Ages though, because right after we're finished with Beowulf, we're going to go to the Canterbury Tales, which is an interesting story. So in October, this very same month in 1066, a day-long battle near Hastings, England, changed the course of history. There, just 10 miles from the channel dividing England from France, Duke William of Normandy, France, defeated and killed King Harold of England, the last of the Anglo-Saxon kings. So began the Norman Conquest, an event that radically affected English history, English character, and English language. Unlike the Romans, the Normans never withdrew from England. So the Normans are from France, and once they moved in and settled into Great Britain, they never left. Remember, the Romans from Italy, they did end up leaving, but it wasn't because they were forced out, it's because they went back home in Italy to go fight. But the Romans, we said they created a lot of infrastructure as far as bridges and roads and walls, and they were able to solidify that land as being impenetrable for the entire time that they were there. So nobody invaded and took it over from the Romans. It's just that they left. Who was this William the Conqueror? He was the illegitimate son of the previous Duke of Normandy, who was in turn a cousin of the English king called Edward the Confessor. Edward had died childless early in 1066, and Harold, the Earl of Wessex, had been crowned the following day. But William claimed that the old king had promised the throne to him. Determined to seize what he considered rightfully his, William sailed the English Channel with an enormous army. William was an efficient and ruthless soldier, but he wanted to rule the Anglo-Saxons, not eliminate them. Today, as a result, rather than a Norman French-speaking England and America, we find a culture and language that subtly intermingle Norman and Anglo-Saxon events. To the Anglo-Saxons' more democratic and artistic tendencies, the Normans brought administrative ability, an emphasis on law and order, and cultural unity. One of William's great administrative feats was an inventory of nearly every piece of property in England, whether it was land, cattle, or buildings, and he put this in the Doomsday Book. The title suggests a comparison between William's judgment of his subjects' financial worth with God's final judgment of their moral worth. For the first time in European history, people could be taxed based on what they owned. Okay, so those people who plan on becoming homeowners one day, you are going to have to pay property taxes. Everyone in the United States does, but you can thank the Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror, for that. Although the Normans did not erase Anglo-Saxon culture, they did bring significant changes to England. William and many of his successors remained dukes of Normandy as well as kings of England. So even though they had taken over England, they still had their positions in France. The powerful Anglo-Norman entity they molded brought England into mainstream European civilization in a new way. For example, William divided the holdings of the fallen English landowners among his own followers. These men and their families brought to England not only a new language, French, but also a new social system, feudalism, which displaced the old Nordic social structure described in Beowulf. So just in review of that much of what I've read, the Anglo-Norman, and again instead of Anglo-Saxon, because the Normans wanted to go in and rule over the Anglo-Saxons, they didn't want to defeat them, it became this Anglo-Norman combination. So the Anglo-Norman entity that resulted from the Norman conquest brought England into mainstream European civilization, which included feudalism. So let's talk about feudalism. Okay, and as soon as you finish this, it's one last slide, and that slide is called Feudalism and Knighthood, Pyramid Power. So again, feudalism and knighthood, pyramid power. All right. So anyhow, more than simply a social system, feudalism was also a caste system, a property system, and a military system. Ultimately, it was based on a religious concept of hierarchy with God as the supreme overlord. In this sense, even a king held land as a vassal by divine right. A king as powerful as William the Conqueror could stand firmly at the top of the pyramid. He could appoint certain barons as his immediate vassals, allotting them portions of his land in return for their economic or military allegiance, or both. In turn, the barons could appoint vassals of their own. The system operated all the way down to the landless knights and to the serfs, who were not free to leave the land they tilled. The feudal system did not always work. Secure in a well-fortified castle, a vassal might choose not to honor his obligations to a weak overlord. The ensuing battles between ironclad knights around moated castles accounts for one of the enduring images of the Middle Ages. Yet, the feudal system did not carry with it a sense of form and manners did Yet the feudal system did carry with it a sense of form and manners that permeated the life, the art, and the literature of the Middle Ages. This sense of formalism came to the life most fully. This sense of formalism came to life most fully in the institution of knighthood and in the related practice or code of chivalry. We cannot think of the medieval period without thinking of knights. Since the primary duty of males above the serf class was military service to their lords, boys were trained from an early age to become warriors. Often their training could take place in houses other than their own to be sure that the training was strict. If we hear of the term medieval period, we inevitably think of knights and their magnificent suits of armor. During the early Middle Ages, armor consisted of a helmet, a shield, and a relatively flexible mail shirt or hauberk made of countless riveted or welded iron rings. With the crossbow, however, came the need for more protection, so the knight was forced to compromise flexibility and mobility for self-defense. Held together by rivets, leather straps, hinges, turning pins, buckles, and pegs, a suit of armor replaced mail, not mail carried by mail carriers, the type of shirts that they wore before the armor came along, which the mail shirts tried to protect the chest from being penetrated by weapons. The armor replaced mail as the warrior's chief protection. Knights wore a heavily padded undergarment of leather and a mail shirt under the armor. In addition to plate arm, plate leg, and plate foot pieces. Mail covered the neck, elbows, and other joints, and gauntlets constructed of link plates covered the hands. Some suits of armor weighed 120 pounds and contained 200 custom-fitted iron plates. The knight also carried a variety of weapons: lance, dagger, sword, battle axe, and club-headed mace. The threat of death in battle was bad enough, but the armor itself could also be fatal, causing death from suffocation, heart failure, even drowning. Battle during hot weather was particularly difficult. Since small slits in the helmet allowed only a limited line of vision and little ventilation, heat stroke, often deadly for the knight, was common. One anonymous poet describes the armored knight as a terrible worm in an iron cocoon. Only aristocratic knights could afford the huge cost of armor, a war horse, pack horses, a mount to ride when not in battle, and servants. Because of the armor's weight and the complex fittings required to piece it together, a knight couldn't dress himself for battle. In fact, battles were usually scheduled to allow the warring knights time to be dressed. Servants stood by during battle in case the knight was unhorsed. An armored knight on his back was like an upside-down turtle trying to get on its feet. In this position, the knight was vulnerable to his adversary. If he fell into a shallow body of water, he could drown. During the 15th century, the knight and his horse were considered invulnerable. But this role changed dramatically when the long bow and later the musket ball came into warfare. When his armor could no longer protect him in battle, The knight in shining armor became more of a courtier than a combatant. In the last years of their existence, knights participated in exhibitions rather than in warfare. And that will complete today's notes. So we're copying every word of every bullet point and every bullet point, and I'm gonna go ahead and start reading. If you missed the 2 slides on Friday, then just know that they're already on the Teams page. And these 2 slides are already on the Teams page. Tomorrow, Professor Davis will be in, but on Wednesday will be our last slide. That's already on the Teams page as well. Do not forget to submit these after you finish copying them. And don't forget to actually read through them, because there will be a quiz for all of the Middle Ages notes on Friday the 25th. So if you're not here on Friday, don't forget to log into Schoology and do your PowerPoint quiz. It's only 10 questions that I created for it. Multiple choice, true or false. It'll be open for an entire week, and I give you 2 attempts on it. And on the Teams page, I also give you the exact questions that are going to be on the quiz, just in case you want to study beforehand. Okay, so, all right. Let's go ahead and get back into the reading of it. So today we are talking about women. So women in the Anglo-Saxon culture of Great Britain had a lot more power than the women of the Middle Ages did. We said the Anglo-Saxons, but even the Celts, we said, and the Celts mythological tales, a lot of them were led by women warriors or just women characters in general. Those tales were more based on, I would say more of a feminine type of emphasis than the Anglo-Saxon tales of the hero and the violence that we'll see in Beowulf. But then still under the Anglo-Saxon culture, because we know the Anglo-Saxons took over Great Britain from the Celts, in the normal Anglo-Saxon culture, just women had a lot more power than they did. If their husbands would die, it was seen that the women were they were in control, or the mistresses, a mistress is someone of authority, they were in control, or the mistresses of the land that they owned with their husband. It was left in the will to them. And then also, just in general, women were also seen as having power in the religious sector, as leading monasteries and nunneries, which they were called abscesses. But in the in the medieval times or the Middle Ages, women did not have any power. And when we think of the struggle that women go through in America, and how much they've had to fight for their rights and the suffrage that they've gone through, we tend to associate that now with the Norman Conquest. And we know the Norman Conquest is associated with France, and it seems like France has this emphasis on stripping women's rights away from them, because we can see a lot of the things that women have had to fight for in this country, even going all the way back to the times of the Middle Ages. So I'll go ahead and read. So again, welcome back to the Kelly Lecture Hall. Women in medieval society, no voice, no choice. Since they were not soldiers, women had no political rights in a system that was primarily military. A woman was always subservient to a man, whether husband, father, or brother. Her husband's or father's social standing determined the degree of respect she commanded. For peasant women, life was a ceaseless round of childbearing, housework, and hard field work. Women of higher station were occupied with childbearing and household supervision. Such women might even manage entire estates while their men were away on business or at war. But the moment the men returned, the women relinquished their temporary powers. So just in review of that section, Women in the Middle Ages had no political power, and we know in the United States it took all the way until 1920 for them to get the right to vote. And a woman's social standing depended completely on her husband or father's status in the Middle Ages. Now let's discuss chivalry, which we've heard a lot about in different cartoons and movies dealing with knights of honor in the Middle Ages. So chivalry and courtly love, ideal but unreal. Chivalry was a system of ideals and social codes governing the behavior of knights and gentlewomen. Among its precepts were adhering to one's oath of loyalty to the overlord and observing certain rules of warfare, such as never attacking an unarmed opponent. In addition, adoring a particular lady, not necessarily one's wife, was seen as a means of achieving self-improvement. The idea that revering and acting in the name of a lady would make a knight braver and better was central to one aspect of chivalry: courtly love. Courtly love was, in its ideal form, non-sexual. A knight might wear his lady's colors in battle. He might glorify her in words and be inspired by her, but the lady always remained pure and out of reach. She was set above her admirer, just as the feudal lord was set above his vassal. And these are two things that we've seen kind of leave in our society, specifically men who are fighting up against each other, having respect in that type of combat where they don't, attack an unarmed opponent. That's seen as a weak type of move. And we see that a lot of times now in police brutality where, the person or the civilian who's being arrested or, they're being targeted, they're not even armed, but they're shot in the back, or they are being antagonized and harassed. So that was one portion of chivalry, was to not attack an unarmed opponent. But also, we see certain values with women. Women not just sleeping around, even when a man was trying to adorn them and approach them. It was kind of just a puppy love, but it wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna give it to anybody who asks for it type of deal. It sounds like women had a lot of respect for their bodies during these times. So since such a concept of chivalry flew in the face of human nature, it provided built-in drama for poets and storytellers, as the King Arthur sagas illustrate. When Sir Lancelot and Queen Guinevere, for example, crossed the line between courtly love and physical love, the whole social system represented by Arthur's Round Table collapses. Camelot crumbles. Chivalry brought about an idealized attitude toward women, but it did little to improve their actual position. A woman's perceived value remained tied to the value of the lands she brought to a marriage. But chivalry did give rise to a new form of literature, the romance. The greatest English example of the genre is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Wandering minstrels told many other romances, but most of them were the equivalents of Dadadam Doggerel verse today. So to wrap that up about chivalry, chivalry led an idealized attitude toward women and gave rise to a form of literature, the romance. So I'm gonna go to the next slide. Anyone still copying this one?
I am.
Okay. The one thing I'm gonna make note of, though, is what it said at the end. Even though women were regarded so high and they had such respect for themselves, none of that stuff helped their position in life to, be people of power or authority or political positioning. And so now, me saying what I said before, just a few minutes ago, now it makes me understand why women, some women that is, not all women, why some women throughout the years have chosen to use sexual advances in order to get where they have to go, because it's like, well, heck, this being nice and being, dignified isn't helping to do anything. Men are still using their physical power to overpower us. So I know what I can get them with. And, sometimes in life you have to, play the game the way that the game is played. So I can't be mad at a woman for doing that, because at some point, no one wants to be oppressed. I think every person at some point understands the struggle of oppression. And women are considered a minority figure, just like minority cultures. All right, so let's go to the next one. I do have to move to the next slide. Hopefully we're finished up. All right, so the last little thing I was supposed to read about the feudalism and knighthood section was that when a boy's training was completed, he was dubbed or ceremonially tapped on his shoulder, originally a hard testing blow. So young men were eventually, once they reached a certain age, they were trained into knighthood as warriors. And once he finished the situation of becoming a knight, he was tapped on his shoulder, and that being his official entrance into knighthood. So once knighted, the youth became a man with the title Sir and the full rights of the warrior caste. So that's how you hear people call or approach knights as Sir this or that, Sir that or this. Knighthood was grounded in the feudal idea of loyalty, and it entailed a complex system of social codes. Breaking any one of those codes would undermine not only the knight's position, but also the very institution of knighthood. Thus, in the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, his code of honor binds Gawain, or binds, I'm sorry. His code of honor binds Gawain to accept a challenge that he believes will bring him certain death. So in review of that little section of feudalism and the pyramid power, feudalism was a pyramid system based on a religious concept of hierarchy, expected to serve as warriors. Males above the serf class were trained as knights. Now, all right, last slide. And the new city classes and great happenings. Last slide. All right, the new city classes out from under the overlords. For the most part, medieval society centered around the feudal castle. But as the population grew, an increasing number of people lived in towns and cities. Eventually, those population centers would render the feudal system obsolete. The development of the city classes, lower, middle, and upper middle, is evident in the works of Geoffrey Chaucer. Many of his characters make their livings outside the feudal system, and their horizons are defined not by any lord's manor, but by such cities as London and Canterbury. More important, the emerging merchant class had its own taste in the arts and the ability to pay for what it wanted. Consequently, much medieval art is not aristocratic, which is the higher privileged class. It is middle class, even people's art. The people of the cities were free, tied neither to the land nor to knighthood and chivalry. Their point of view was expressed in the ballads sung in alehouses and firesides, and the mystery and miracle plays performed outdoors by the new guilds or craft unions, and even in the great cathedrals and municipal buildings that were synonymous with England to so many tourists today. So to recap over that section about the new city classes, the new city dwellers' point of view was expressed in ballads, in mystery and miracle plays, and in cathedrals and municipal buildings. And one thing that we notice from even this period of time so many years ago is that the structuring of the layout of even our society and how we live, you know, cities and being urban areas with just regular everyday common folk who are usually struggling to make a living. We see that all the way back during the Middle Ages, when we usually think of only castles and knights and horses and battle. There were still these things called cities that were developing much like they are today. And you had the different class levels. You had the lower class, which are the poor people.
Wasn't there like the like communists and the communers or something like that too? Something like that, like.
There may have been. It didn't speak on the economic system, but you know, a communist society. Well, no, I don't think so, because here they were talking about the merchant class, and the merchant class, that means that you are basically going into business and selling things as a business owner or an entrepreneur. Communism is when the government controls you and no one has their own thoughts or their own business. And so when it said that these people are free and they don't have to the same pressures as the court system of the knights and the other and in chivalry, then I would say no, they probably did not observe communism. But they had the different classes though, the middle class, and then the upper middle class as well, just like we have now. And so now the great happenings. Against the backdrop of the feudal system imported from the continent, several specific events radically influenced the course of English history as well as English literature. The Crusades, ho, for the Holy Land. In Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, we meet a knight who has fought in heathen places along the Mediterranean Sea and in North Africa. The knight's adventures in the 14th century were really an extension of the Crusades from 1095 through 1270 AD. A series of wars waged by European Christians against the Muslims, with Jerusalem and the Holy Land as the prize. Although the Europeans ultimately failed to hold Jerusalem, they benefited enormously from contact with the higher civilization of the Middle East. This contact with Eastern mathematics, astronomy, architect, and craft made possible the rich, varied life we find in Chaucer. If the Crusades produced Chaucer's fairly conventional knight, they were also at least indirectly responsible for his lively squire and elegant prioress. The Crusades, to wrap that up, exposed Christian Europe to the Middle East sophisticated civilization. And so that's what brought the upper class, the rich hoity-toity class to England, was the Christians fighting the Muslims, which were two extremely powerful religious groups. But unfortunately, the Christians did not win. But what they did do is they understood a new level of academic achievement, which was mathematics and architecture and astronomy, which we know is studying the sky. So there was some benefit in that loss. They turned those lemons into lemonade. Now, final section, the martyrdom of Thomas, martyr being our last vocabulary word, the martyrdom of Thomas A. Becket, murder in the cathedral. When Chaucer's pilgrims set out for Canterbury, their goal was the shrine of St. Thomas A. Becket. He lived from 1118 through 1170. Thomas, a Norman, had risen to great power as chancellor or prime minister under his friend King Henry II, who reigned from 1154 through 1189. At the time, all Christians belonged to the Catholic Church, and even King Henry was a vassal of the Pope, the head of the church of God's representative. So even during these times, the king was under the Pope of the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church was in power and had the most power. The Pope in those days was enormously powerful and controlled most of the crowned heads of Europe. By appointing his trusted friend Thomas as Archbishop of Canterbury, head of the Catholic Church in England, Henry hoped to gain the upper hand in his disputes with the church, but the independent and often combative Thomas took the Pope's side more than once, infuriating the king. In December of 1170, Henry raged, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" Taking his words literally, 4 of Henry's knights murdered Becket right in his own cathedral. Public outrage at this rash deed led to devotion to St. Thomas the Martyr and created a backlash against Henry. A significant setback for the monarchy in its power struggles with Rome. At its worst, this setback led to the kinds of liberties taken by several of the clergymen in the Canterbury Tales. Corruption that the state was in no position to correct. Thus, Chaucer's monk lives a life of luxury without regard to the poor. His friar chases women and money, and his summoner and his pardoner blackmail people with threats of eternal damnation. Yet the medieval church did have one positive effect. It fostered cultural unity, a system of belief and symbol that transcended the national cultures of Europe. The church continued to be the center of learning. Its monasteries were the libraries and publishers of the time, and its language, Latin, remained the international language of the educated Europeans. Its leader, the Pope, was king of all kings, and his kingdom had no boundaries. Just to wrap up that section, public outrage at the political assassination of Thomas A. Becket strengthened the power of the Catholic Church. The state became powerless to correct widespread clerical corruption. So the king, Henry, he felt like because, as a king, he didn't have as much power as you would think a king would have. He had to answer to the Pope. And because he had to answer to the Pope, he felt some type of way about that. And so what he did was he had his friend to be installed or instated as the archbishop over the church. And so he felt like, okay, if I got my dog up in here, then we're about to really run this boy. We're about to run circles around this boy. But what he realized is that his friend did not agree with him as much as he thought, and he ends up having these feuds and these arguments with his friend to the point that he was tired of his friend and started bad-mouthing him behind his back, and his own knights, King Henry's knights, ended up killing or assassinating him, and the entire kingdom actually shifted and took the side of Thomas, who became the martyr. Remember, a martyr is someone who dies for their religious causes, so they considered him to be a martyr, and they started to kind of be more associated with him than with the king, who was still alive. So it was a bunch of people in this kingdom running rampant, doing whatever they wanted to do, lawlessness that went uncontrolled after that assassination. But it just goes to show you that they always say that you can't live with your friends and you cannot work with your friends. And so those people who end up thinking, me and my homie about to get this apartment, and we, or my young ladies who think they about to, rent out a house together, and she take this room and I'll take this room and we share the rest of the house. Just keep in mind, a lot of friends who end up sharing living quarters together or working together, their relationships become strained. They always say you can't work with your friends, you can't live with your friends. All right. So the Magna Carta, power to some of the people. The event that most clearly heralded a return to older democratic tendencies in England was the signing of the Magna Carta, the Great Charter, by King John in 1215 at Runnymede. And so the last time that we talked on Monday, we were talking about the fact that the church was getting out of control because the king, King Henry, had made these gestures that his friend Thomas Mallory should be killed, or I'm sorry, Thomas Becket. He had made these, inflammatory claims that his friend, who he's the one who allowed Thomas Becket to be in the archbishop position, but then when he got in there, he noticed that his friend started to disagree with him more than a regular archbishop would normally do. He thought if he put his friend in a position of power, then that would help him be able to run his kingdom a little more like he would like to. Because again, during these times, the church was extremely powerful. So he enlisted someone to be in a position of power in the church, but that didn't help. And so when he muttered this phrase that he wished someone would basically rid him of his friend, his knights who work under him took it literally and they killed him. But the entire kingdom took it personally, and they started to honestly be lawless in all of their deeds. So they started to run amok, and the entire kingdom was basically on a rampage of lawlessness, not listening to anything that the king had enforced, and the church was starting to be overpowerful and doing too much. And so the people who were under the king, his barons, they got tired of it, and they decided to make him sign a document forcing him to relinquish some of the power from not only himself but also from the church, so that people did not have to sit around and obey what the church had commanded any longer. And that was called the Magna Carta. The vicious but pragmatic John was strongly backed by the Pope, but the English barons forced him to sign the document. The signing was a defeat for central papal power. Papal power is the power of the Pope. As aristocrats writing for aristocrats, again, these are upper class people writing for upper class people who had the king to sign the document, these barons had no interest in the rights of the common people. So really they were just looking out for themselves and not wanting to follow the church, who was getting out of control any longer. But the Magna Carta later became the basis for English constitutional law, in which such rights as trial by jury and legislative taxation were established. So this was the beginning of what is considered now their current type of government. So as a review of that section, in 1215, the English barons forced King John to sign the Magna Carta as an effort to curb the church's power. The document later became the basis for English constitutional law. And as you know, we have a constitution that is very similar to the government in England, our United States Constitution. So the Magna Carta had a lot of influence in its early days. So now we move on to the 100 Years' War, which was also mentioned in the review video for the Middle Ages. From 1337 to 1453, the arrow is mightier than the armor. What might be called the first national war was waged by England against France, fought on the continent of Europe. That is, England and France are countries. The 100 Years' War was based on dubious claims to the throne of France by two English kings, Edward III, who reigned from 1327 until 1377, and Henry V, who reigned from 1413 to 1422. So those two kings were trying to take over the throne in France. This protracted war was militarily unsuccessful for the English, but it was an important factor in the gradual development of a British national consciousness. After the war, the English were no longer best represented by the knight in shining armor, an import from the continent anyway. Instead, they were more accurately represented by the green-clad yeoman, who is known as a small landowner with his long bow. These English yeomen had formed the nucleus of the English armies in France. Their yard-long arrows would fly over castle walls and pierce the armor of knights. These small landowners now became a dominant force in the new society that grew out of the ruins of feudalism. The old ideas of chivalry lived on only in stories such as the King Arthur tales retold by Sir Thomas Malory. So to review that part, the English lost the 100 Years' War with France, but in the process they began to think of themselves as British rather than Anglo-Norman. With the advent of the yeoman class, modern democratic England was born. So again, this is how the knight in shining armor became a thing of the past, because you had new weaponry like the bow, the bow and arrow, and then other things were being created as well, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But the bow was able to pierce those armor plates, and so there was no need to wear all of those pounds, 120 pounds to be exact, what we said last time. There was no need to wear all of that armor in battle anymore, because the weaponry could plow right through it. Now, the Black Death. The Black Death, or the bubonic plague, which was also mentioned in the video, which struck England from 1348 to 1349, was another pandemic, just like we saw with coronavirus or COVID-19. But the bubonic plague delivered another blow to feudalism. Highly contagious and spread by fleas from infected rats, the disease reduced the nation's population by a third, causing a labor shortage and inevitably giving the lower class more leverage than ever before, because their overlords ever before against their overlords. One long-term result was the serfs. The serfs are the lowest people in the feudalism pyramid. Remember, we said pyramid power. So at the top of the pyramid is God, and then you have the kings, who have the next amount of power. And we know that the church or the pope would be right up there with the king, sometimes over the king. But then you would have the barons who report to the king as vassals, or again, people who are employed by the king. That's what a vassal is, a servant of sorts. Then you have the knights who fight for the king, and then you have the serfs, the people who really just work the land, and they're not allowed to leave the land. They're on the lowest of the totem pole. They're basically like slaves. The serfs are basically like slaves. So during the Black Death, though, the serfs gained power because of the labor shortage, and one long-term result was the serfs' freedom, which knocked out feudalism and that whole pyramid system last support. By the time King Henry VII's 1485 marriage reconciled the warring houses of York and Lancaster, the Middle Ages were ending in England. Henry, a strong king, began the Tudor line that would lead to Elizabeth I. England's Renaissance was about to begin, which is our next PowerPoint series, the Renaissance period. And no, I'm not talking about Beyonce's album. Okay? The Black Death, in review of that section, caused a labor shortage leading to the serfs' freedom and to the end of feudalism. But just like with COVID-19, which caused a lot of people to obviously die, but it also caused a lot of people to have a certain awakening and to realize that they may not want to work in the industries that they worked in. A lot of people quit their jobs. A lot of people relocated across the country, across the world, and a lot of people just had a certain reflection on life that changed their entire careers. And so it started to put the employees in power and not the employers. So that's how we had a lot of businesses that started to close early because they don't have enough employees who want to even work for them. And that's how you have a lot of businesses who just went out of business. And still to this day, we don't have Meijer open 24 hours like it is supposed to be. We don't have Walmart open 24 hours still. And for a while during that COVID-19 period, a lot of even fast food restaurants were closing too early because of the lack of labor, which gave power again to the employees because they needed people to come in. So employees could basically name their price. And, all right, one last section. Fleas, money, and gunpowder. The end of an era. The legendary pageantry. The legendary pageantry, the codes of chivalry, the heroic quest undertaken by valiant knights in honor of fair ladies. These images come to mind at the mention of the Middle Ages. But what happened? Why did this period come to an end? Besides the plague's devastating effects, the development of a monetary system and the introduction of gunpowder contributed to changes in medieval England. So just in case you're wondering, well, how did times change? This is how they changed. Before the 11th century, few coins existed in England and Western Europe. The English upper classes used gold and silver valued by weight. And foreign coins were usually melted down and transformed into ingots. Feudal lords made their own coins for use only on their property, and serfs used a barter system of, trading with each other for purchases within the community. So there were all of these different types of money systems, even within the same country, which doesn't help with trying to, run an efficient economy. But the Crusades brought an economic change, for crusaders needed money that would be accepted in other lands. Silver was heavy, but gold coins were light and already in use throughout trade routes. The use of gold coins improved the peasants' buying and selling power. Instead of the barter system of trading with each other, they were now able to earn gold in exchange for their labor or goods. So now they were able to actually stack up some real money that could be used in different areas and not just trade for what they needed, even for their labor. The minting, or the creating of coins, was essential in the revival of England's economy. Chivalric codes governed hand-to-hand combat during much of the Middle Ages, so switching over from money into combat, but the use of guns and gunpowder, as we see today, and strategic military planning changed all of that. Discovered by the Chinese, gunpowder was introduced into English warfare around 1325. By 1346, warfare in the Western world had changed irreversibly. In the landmark Battle of Crecy, the French outnumbered the English. The English, aided by the longbow and by explosives, massacred their opponents. So even though they were outnumbered by the French, the English, because they had caught on to creating these weapons called guns, and using gunpowder for cannons and having these bows and arrows, they were able to obviously get the upper hand, just like anyone who has a gun today. So over the next 200 years, the cannon made the castle, which was previously impregnable, open to attack, and the rules of war and class had changed. Chivalry was at an end, and feudal obligation became a thing of the past. As a result, a free and prosperous middle class developed, revolutionizing the country's social and economic systems. All right.